In the meantime, very happy to introduce Senator Eoin Ó Ríordáin, who was Minister of State for Equality, New Communities and Culture in the last Dáil, and a very long time champion of marriage equality, and also on a very broad range, as an advocate, a very broad range of equality issues. You're welcome, Eoin.
Thanks very much, and it's great to be here. I suppose I should...
I didn't say that you're the Labour Party, sorry, I did name everybody else's party, so...
I'll come back to that. I suppose I might just start off my presentation by saying that I am originally a teacher, and when I became a principal of a primary school in the inner city in Dublin, I was given two great pieces of advice. One was that at the centre of every decision you ever make, have a child at the centre of that decision. Because then if you're advocating for anything in terms of a decision, or you're arguing with staff or parents or board of management, at the centre of that decision, if there's a child, they'll never ever doubt your integrity. Never doubt your integrity. They may disagree with you, but they'll never doubt your integrity. So when we're campaigning, at the centre of what we're doing, if there's a human being or humanity, well then nobody can ever doubt the integrity of what we're campaigning for. And the second thing, the advice I was given was, at the end of the day, when the kids are all gone from your school and the staff have all gone from your school, take the opportunity to sit in one of the children's chairs and see the world from where they're sitting. And I suppose, you know, when you're campaigning for things and advocating for communities that you're not a member of. I'm not a member of the LGBT community, I'm not a member of the travelling community, I'm not a member of a migrant community, but you have to constantly remind yourself of how to view the world from where they are looking from. And I think the presentation here today is about how you can use the political system to advance your goals. And there's a number of different ways you can do that. I mean, the Labour Party were passing motions through our conferences in terms of civil union and in terms of marriage equality going back to the mid-2000s. But I suppose it's how we determined to use that political platform to advance the cause. So there can often be friction between those two things. One, to be seen to be making noise about something, or do you see it to be actually advancing it? And while we would have had manifesto commitments on the back of those conference votes in 2007 to bring forward legislation on civil union or to campaign for a referendum on marriage equality, are you willing to work with others to bring it to the fore, or do you want this to be just your own party political platform? And for example, when the Fianna Fáil Green Party government brought forward the Civil Partnership Bill, the question could, I suppose, being posed in some people's minds, well, this isn't marriage equality. Let's vote against it because it's not marriage equality. And that thought never came into our minds, but there might have been some people who felt that way, that it wasn't enough. It's less than equality. But what happened in that debate, and people who remember that debate, is that it was passed without a vote in Leinster House in the Dáil. And there was a vote in the Seanad, I think, because there were some quite vociferous voices in the Seanad at that time against it. But I think it was interesting that the political system was willing to take the politics out of something, and that a political party was willing, I suppose, not to grandstand on it. And I think maybe there's a conversation in this room to be had. Would marriage equality have been as successful a campaign and passed as readily if we didn't have the 5 years experience of civil partnership? Because there was maybe in communities around the country who had couples having what effectively was a wedding in communities, it brought the whole issue home to where they were. Now, when we went into government in 2011, there was a lot of things going on. As you can imagine, the conversation was all about the economy. And then we proposed the idea of a referendum on marriage equality. And there were voices within the marriage equality movement who said that we didn't need a referendum, it would be done by legislation. And I suppose a lot of conversation had to have within ourselves as to what the best way to proceed. And some people maybe were nervous about the idea of having a referendum. Some people were objected to the idea of having to ask others for their basic equality. And maybe the timing of it was key. But there was, between ourselves and Fine Gael, their one big constitutional demand was the referendum on the Seanad. We had two constitutional demands. One was the Constitutional Convention and one on the referendum on marriage equality. So what happened was the Constitutional Convention took place, marriage equality was part of that conversation, and the referendum Seanad campaign took place as well. But in that room, over the course of that weekend at the Constitutional Convention, it was really important to flesh out the conversation with different people from different political backgrounds, and also for us to learn that the people that are around the table from us at the Constitutional Convention, you know, sometimes you have an idea in your mind of what a no voter looks like, you know. I know I have the person in my mind as to what a no voter looks like. But then you're surrounded by, yeah, I know. No, I'm not going to tell you. But then you're in a situation, you're seated just like this, as we were in the Grand Hotel in Malahide. And there's very reasonable, rational people around the table from you, very decent, compassionate people who are not in favor of this idea, because there are 95% there, but the 5% is hurting them. They just can't get the whole 100%. And to tease out those issues with them was really fascinating, because you can be 95% in favor of something, but you'll still vote against it. It's different in a general election, because in a general election, you can vote number 2 for somebody or 3 for somebody. You can give a kind of a half a vote to somebody, but not in a referendum. It's yes or no. So I think the time that it happened, and the advice we were getting from the polling advice that we would have shared, I know other political parties did it as well, about the level of political involvement we needed to take place. So I think the political system facilitated the referendum, but it didn't win it. And there was definitely, I think, one of the successes of the marriage equality campaign and the Yes Equality campaign was that politicians felt welcome at the events. You had a march, you had a press conference, you had a launch. If you were there, you were welcomed. You were felt as if you were part of the solution. And certainly when the campaign started, I mean, we would have had public meetings around the country. I was just reminded, actually, when I came in, I met a lady who was at the very first one we had in the previous October in Sligo. And there would have been about 7 people in the room. And then we had one in Waterford, and we had one in Galway, and we had, they were building momentum all the time. And what was really fascinating was that you had to bring it to the local area and to have the local person from that local part of the world to say, this is my life story. I remember one in Nina where a chap stood up and told the whole story of his life. And just like sitting in the child's chair, what his life had been. And they all knew who he was, and they had never really ever thought of looking at life from his perspective. In terms of the party political engagement in the campaign and that, we have to remember that there has been and there is a kind of an anti-politician, anti-politics feel around the country. And as you quite rightly said, if all the political parties are saying something, it must be wrong. And that, in that atmosphere, the advice we got and were willing to take and we're willing to share with you now is that it was more important that politicians were seen to take a lead when it was important to take a lead and not shy away from it, but to allow the other voices to come to the fore. But I'll say this quite honestly, and I'll finish here. Apart from the fact that I got a hug out of Port McLaughlin on the day of the referendum or something, which was a unique and special event. I have to say, I remember I wrote a blog piece before saying it was the most important vote in my life. I have never, ever felt anything like I felt that day. And if I had to choose between winning my Dáil seat back and winning that referendum, I know what I would have chosen every single time. Winning that referendum was absolutely wonderful, because it just gave us a glimpse of the kind of Ireland we could have. But there's lessons to be learned from it. If you fully believe in something so much, I mean, we are involved in traveller rights issues, and drug decriminalisation is something I feel very strongly about. Are you willing, because you believe in something so much, to talk to the person who's implacably opposed to your point of view in a compassionate and listening mode, because you're absolutely determined to go that extra mile? Because that is what, unfortunately or fortunately, what it takes. Talking to ourselves is fair enough, and I suppose you have to learn and discuss campaigning. But are you willing, because you care about something so much, you believe in something so much, to talk to somebody who you know doesn't believe in it, and make them go from the 95% to the 100%?
Thanks very much.